Have you ever dreamt of flying? That feel of floating in the air but then woke up miserably because you felt cheated? Then there's hope for you with Gravity Rush 2. I always woke up high as a kite when I had such a dream, and Gravity Rush 2 just met my expectations. Let me start off by saying the best thing about Gravity Rush. The option to gravitate is what makes this game special. With just a push of the R1 button, you can fly to any place at amazing speeds. It is an absolute joy to tinker with and gives a sense of freedom that I only encountered the last time in the old Spider-Man games. I wish I could do this in real life all the time. Letting yourself drop from a huge altitude and at the last moment activating gravity is pure joy. It feels really good having some Japanese themed games on the PS4 in the West, as they are still subordinate to commercial Western AAA titles. Games like these also remind me of the good old PlayStation 1 and 2 era, where experimental games were all over the place. The game focuses around female protagonist Kat, who was also prominent in the first installment. I have to be straight up honest, I never played the first game, as I remember it was only released on the PlayStation Vita. Now there is an HD remake out there for the PS4, but you can skip that one if you want to, because this game keeps referring to that storyline. It's narrated through cutscenes, but more frequent in its comic book style with added fictional language. It is one of the reasons why Gravity Rush 2 reminds me of another favorite game of mine, Zelda the Wind Waker. Next to having its gibberish talk, the visual presentation in its characters, enemies and worlds are a resemblance to that game. And there's the cel-shaded look of course, which reminds me of another favorite, Jet Set Radio. Although I encourage games like these, I had to say that the game is somewhat a niche and has to suit you, as it isn't a hardcore action game. But I absolutely adore the visual representation of the game. Combat might not be everyone's cup of tea though. Melee combat is a button bashing fest, status stack sometimes feels like ring tossing at a carnival, and using the gravity kick is a hit and miss. Boss fights are 50-50 on being exciting. Some of them are just tiresome, messy, boring, and overall frustrating. This resulted in me using cheap techniques to get it over with. The finishers that come with it are overall satisfying though. Did I mention that Cat and Raven are dead sexy? Man, those hips, bruh. Let me do a Google search on that. Holy shit. One of the more memorable things is the catchy music. It's lively, full of trumpets, violins and just swing. This tune keeps sticking in my head. But why is the game that easy? The game is hardly a challenge and many times I never felt like I was going to die. The times that I did die was because some missions are plain trial and error. The stealth mechanic during some missions is weak because the enemy AI is either extremely stupid or immense hardcore. Towns are filled with people and collectible gems but feel hollow. It feels like there could have been done more, like having minigames set up in stores. Perhaps something in the line of Shenmue to deliver a more interactive experience. But searching for places in photos is fun to do, as it feels like a little bit of detective work. There are no waypoints you can set on a world map. Especially during free roam mining ore missions, this can be annoying. These mining ore maps are huge and have no reference points. This means you could be flying in a wrong direction without even knowing, and you have to check the map frequently. Speaking of the mining ore missions, I wish there were hidden spaces and places where you could fight secret bosses or special items. The gravity controls have a steep learning curve. It took me a couple of hours to somehow get used to them, but after that I felt a bit more competent. It doesn't help that the camera when flying can sometimes be irritating as well as nauseating. There were times that I got motion sickness due to the camera work in small corridors while using gravity. But the biggest letdown is the main storyline, which is incoherent and makes for a dull, non-engaging experience. It starts out with rebels versus rich people, but switches that often that I just gave up on the whole thing. At the end, the storyline you began with left no trace at all and is never mentioned again. Then there's the side missions. I love side missions in general, as they are ideal for powering up your character. However, the side missions in Gravity Rush 2 are poorly written and consist mainly out of fetch quests. The payoff most of the times are uninteresting things like photo filters and sometimes better stuff like health upgrades and new outfits. Main missions consist of fetch quests that divide themselves during these fetch quests into other fetch quests. Some of them are frustrating trial and error missions that divert from any fun and you can't skip them. Let me make this clear, if there's one thing I really hate, it's fetch quests. And many people may disagree with my opinion, but it feels like this game had so much potential. But somehow the developers ran out of ideas midway and started recycling gameplay elements throughout the game. I felt boredom because a lot of these sequences in the game feel utterly random, uninspired and just fitted in to stretch the game's length. There were times I was thinking about doing household chores. Not a good sign. The game supposedly ends at chapter 21 with an abrupt boss finish and fake credits. After that you have the option to do the final mission, which spans another 6 chapters and feels like a wild goose chase in the first half. The second half consists of doing mind-numbing chores and puzzling. And the third and final chapter is one boss fight after another until you get sick of it. There's a lot that can be said about this game and it feels like a mixed bag. In the end, Gravity Rush feels, pun intended, rushed on the gameplay and storytelling side. Gravitating feels like a gimmick with a beautiful but lackluster world built around it. Majestic visuals, a stylish presentation and grand artwork can't hide the fact that Gravity Rush is an overall mediocre experience that could redeem itself with a follow-up. However, reading up on the fact that sales weren't that great, releasing a third game in the series might never come true, which is an absolute shame, as this game deserves to have its flaws corrected.